live. Marnie Glickman.
Jason.
From Portland, Oregon. Is that, so here's my quick question before we start. Is that behind you, is that slate like a chalkboard on the wall there?
Yeah, I want to know that too.
Well, that's funny you notice it. The former owners put in this pleather wallpaper, hipster with some chrome studs. But thank you very much for asking.
So it's not slate, it's like soft, it's textual.
Yeah, it's pleather.
Pleather.
You'll have to come see it. Everyone. Jason, it's episode 65.
Amazing. We are joined by Suzanne Grandchamp, who's coming to us from the East Bay, from Point Richmond. Suzanne, welcome. Welcome to episode 65.
Thanks, I appreciate it. And for those who don't know where Richmond is, or Point Richmond, it's in San Francisco. That's just generally, when I tell people who aren't familiar with it, you know, that's where I say I'm from.
Yeah, now, is it part of the city of San Francisco? I think there's a city called Richmond, right? Is it just in Richmond, or is it? It's
in Point Richmond. Point Richmond is on the water, and Richmond's inland just a little bit, but it's really like the tip of the East Bay, sticking into the bay. Yeah.
I went to a wedding many years ago and stayed with a guy that I knew through a friend of a friend in Richmond. And it was just funny because it was like he had bought a house with his wife out there. We're like, man, you bought a house in the Bay Area. Amazing. And it was this little 2-bedroom cracker box in Richmond.
Yeah.
And he's like, yep, last city that I can afford to buy a house in.
Yeah.
In the whole Bay Area.
Yeah. And then there's probably $800,000, you know?
Oh, yes. No, definitely. We were like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is life like for you in Richmond? What are you up to? I guess translate that however you'd like. Some people talk about their jobs. Some people talk about
Sure. Well, I'll just say that I've been in Point Richmond for a relatively short time, since about the first of the year, and before that I lived in Colorado for a while. I was in Arvada, which is a suburb most recently. I also have a place up in Silverthorne, which is up in the mountains in Summit County. And I started, I was there for probably, I don't know, a few years. And then before that in Aurora. And I've also lived in St. Thomas on the US Virgin Islands. And then previous to that, I lived in Minnesota. And so the move to the Bay Area for me was a job opportunity that I have taken advantage of. I still work as an attorney right now, and I'm actually licensed to practice law in Minnesota. And so people are like, well, how do you be an attorney in Minnesota when you live in California or when you lived in Colorado? But really, the practice of law is mostly done over the phone. At least my practice is. I'm a family law attorney. And it's mostly done over the phone and over email. And now with Zoom conferences, I used to FaceTime a lot before. I used Zoom some before the pandemic. But now all court appearances are mandatory in a Zoom format, with a few exceptions. But I haven't had any in-person court appearances for approximately a year and a half. And go ahead.
Oh, Suzanne, Jason, did you see that video of the attorney who went on Zoom and was a cat?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yes.
It was great. Your Honor, I'm not a cat. I can see that.
It was so fun.
So do you practice law all over the country, or in just specific jurisdictions where you're licensed?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself, and maybe Marnie, you know, she can speak to her experience. Yeah. But as a family law attorney, my license is effective only or valid only in the state of Minnesota. Yeah. And so that's where I practice. Now, some attorneys do more regulatory work or different kinds of work, which may be more federal in nature or whatever, and they may have a little bit different breadth of practice, but that's my experience. Marnie, what's yours?
Well, the practice of law is governed statewide, so you can be a member of multiple bar associations. Right. I'm only a member of the Oregon Bar, so I can only practice here. So did you go to law school in Minnesota or the Virgin Islands?
I did. I went to law school at William Mitchell College of Law in St. Paul, and I did my undergrad at the University of Minnesota. So I really stayed close to home for a long while. And then about midlife, I really had a desire to stretch my wings, and maybe it was an early midlife crisis. I don't know. I had breast cancer at age 41. So I had a lumpectomy and then radiation treatment. And it was a real wake-up call to me as far as if there were things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see, you know, people I wanted to meet or whatever, it was time to get on it and get moving.
Oh.
And so that was the impetus for me to move, I believe. I had always wanted to live elsewhere, or had that in my experience. I was an international relations major in college. So I really liked traveling. I really liked experiencing different cultures and people. And so once I had the mortality check and went through that process, I thought, okay, you know, where do you want to be? Where do you want to start to be? And Colorado was a natural draw for me. I love the sunshine, the more temperate weather, and the very friendly people.
So is Colorado really more temperate than Minnesota?
Surprisingly, it is. It gets snow and it can get very cold. And Colorado can have, you know, 0 degree or below 0 degree weather. However, people will also, you'll see people playing golf in February in Denver because it'll be 50 degrees or 55 degrees and sunny, and the course is dry enough to play. So it's not, certainly not as temperate as California, but it's 900, almost 1,000 miles to the southwest of Minnesota. So I found it to be more temperate. Now that's not true for the mountains. If you're up in Summit County or Pitkin County or Grand or what up, you know, up in the mountains somewhere, it is as cold and snowy as Minnesota can be.
So how did you make your way to St. Thomas?
I fell in love and I moved for love.
Okay.
And it was, I did. And it was a great idea at the time. And I love the person very much, but I could not live on a little island that was 3 miles wide by 15 miles long and relatively more provincial. I mean, I guess is the nice way to say it.
Yeah.
And so that worked for a while. And then ultimately I was like, no, this isn't my home. I love this person, but this isn't home for me. And that was my partner's home. And so I had to make the decision about whether to stay or leave. And so I came back to the continental US and you know, I enjoyed the experience. It's certainly a different place to live when you live in a vacation climate and a place where St. Thomas is also very racially different from any place I've lived in the continental United States. There are probably 90% African Americans, and it was a wonderful experience to be there and to have that, you know, that situation where I was the minority, because I've never been really the minority in my entire life, and the experience was very positive. But it was just a very small place, a very constrained place, and there was a lot of hierarchy I found, and it was just not my place, is the best way I can say it.
Yeah.
So I like the sunshine. The weather was certainly very temperate in St. Thomas, although I'll say it got very hot and humid in the summer, just like Minnesota can be, you know, 102 degrees or 98 degrees with 90% humidity. So, but ultimately I transitioned out of the relationship and out of St. Thomas and then back to Colorado.
It is a funny thing to, you know, whenever I travel anywhere, you know, maybe about the second or third day, you really start thinking like, what would life be like if I lived here? Could, you know, you start, I mean, my wife is famous. She finds always, almost by accident, those real estate offices that have all the, you know, the listings just taped to the window.
Yeah.
And start looking at these properties like, oh, what would life be like living here? So you tried it and it wasn't for you. Well, the island life maybe wasn't for you.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. And really, I would have had to make a decision to get licensed in the bar there, because making court appearances, I hired somebody to make court appearances for me in Minnesota. And I also had a law partner, but she had a full caseload herself.
Sure.
So she could help, but she couldn't. And I could still do all the work because I had great internet service and was on the phone and just timed it such that I worked at the same hours that I had my office open in Minneapolis. But I hired a different attorney to make some court appearances, but I was at the point where I would need to get licensed in St. Thomas and really transfer the practice there. I should say, begin a practice there. And that was at the point when I was realizing that island life wasn't for me. And yeah, I've come to learn that I like some cool weather. It doesn't have to be 25 degrees and snowy or whatever, but even over here in the East Bay, it's really quite temperate. Marnie, I think you lived in Marin. Marin can be warm.
Yes.
In the East Bay, I mean, almost every day is 72 during the day and then about 52 or 55 at night. And that works pretty well.
So speaking of your law practice, when I was doing a little Suzanne research, did I see correctly that you wrote a book?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about it?
Sure, I'll show you a copy of it.
Okay.
I have it back here because sometimes I refer to it myself. But it's called,
Okay.
that's nice. It's called Marriages End, Families Don't Divorce Wisely. And it's a primer about how to get through the transition of divorce from not only the legal perspective, but also financial, emotional, and as an opportunity for personal growth, because it's a ripe transition to take a look at where you are and where you want to go, especially relationally moving forward.
Well, what year did you write that book?
2015.
Yeah, one of the questions I had is, does it change decade to decade, the experience of divorce?
Yeah, it may. A lot of the laws are, pretty somewhat similar in like the best interest standards is ubiquitous as far as how children are general. I mean, there may be some different factors, but the idea that we make child-focused decisions is pretty ubiquitous. The concepts of child support generally, regardless of how it's determined, whether that's some sort of some like a rubric, that's you plug in numbers and you punch a button. Spousal maintenance is also too ubiquitous as a concept. It may be applied differently in different states. And certainly it would, the laws change from time to time. Child support, for example, in Minnesota, as far as how it's calculated, changed pretty dramatically in 2008, as I recall. But the concepts generally that you have to figure out how you're going to support your kids, that often there's not only a basic child support element, but also a daycare contribution to be figured out. And then often how are we going to deal with the medical expenses and uninsured, not only the premium, but the uninsured expenses. Those are pretty global concepts. And the book refers to the global concepts. I really did not write it state specific to Minnesota. And there's no way in which I could, write a book that could deal with each of the laws in all 50 states. It's just a primer generally so that people can read it, get an idea of the general concepts so they can start to ask questions of their attorney, or even, they might be working with legal aid, or they might have, they might be able to do a little bit better research also if they're going to be pro se. So that's the idea, because the reason I wrote it is every time I had a prospective client leave my office after a consultation, their eyes were like this big with all this information about what this transition looks like, the different aspects of it. And there's no way in heck they could remember, all that information. And often they're emotionally flooded when they come into the office. So I don't even know really what they hear anyway. So I really wrote it as something to give to them, to take with them when they went home, so they could kind of look through it and maybe like, oh, I think she said something about that, or oh, I didn't know that, or whatever.
I wish I had had a book like that. That's why I noticed it.
Okay.
Another question I quickly had about divorce is, do you think that the stigma of divorce has changed
I do.
Yeah.
I think our society is evolving, and I not only think the stigma has lessened, Marnie, but I also believe that the whole way in which divorce gets played out and the outcomes in divorce have changed. So I've been practicing 25 years, and that's harder than heck for me to say, because I still think of myself as like a 27-year-old, but I'm not. And my face tells me that every day when I look in the mirror, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? But it is, you know, it's been a while that I've been at this, and during that time frame, what I can tell you is that not only is the stigma lessened, but it's become far less adversarial. Generally speaking, there's been a huge movement toward collaborative law, both just generally and as a specific process, whereby the parties work through the issues with their attorneys. A huge push toward mediation, and a huge push toward services like early neutral evaluations that help people get to an agreement regarding social issues and financial issues that really served to truncate the length of the divorce, and also to depolarize it, maybe is the best way to say it. And along those lines, the outcomes have changed a lot too. There are far more men who are custodial parents, whether they have full custody or share joint custody, whether that's legal or physical, and there's much more involvement. You know, it used to be so routine in 1996 or 97 or whenever I started to basically have the opposing parties served by the sheriff, and then for us to ask for, you know, if we represented mom's whole physical custody with joint legal custody and parenting time for dad, that was, you know, 1 or 2 evenings a week and alternate weekends. Well, that's gone out the window completely, and it's good because, you know, the parenting, you know, the more active both parents are in the lives of the kids, I think the better. Personally, that's what I've seen anecdotally in my own practice.
Very cool. Well, Jason and Suzanne, we have many people wanting to say hello. I'll make a segue here. So Chad Alt is here, Chris Camp is here, Ramon Reyna says hello, and Chad Alt has an important question. I'll just read it to you. Love of horses?
Yeah.
Any fur babies?
Yeah, I have a dog. She's right outside my office now. She was very unhappy that I was going to hop on this call in lieu of taking her for a hike. But I promised her I'd do that afterwards. So I have one dog, and I rode a ton in Colorado and had a lease arrangement with friends who lived out by Kremling. And they ran a little dude ranch, and I would go and ride probably 3 times a week. And there have been different points in my life where I've done that, where I've leased a horse, but I don't own a horse right now. And I'm glad for that, because I couldn't get out to the stable to maintain a continuing connection with an animal. So.
Did you grow up riding horses, Suzanne?
I did when I was a kid, younger. Okay. And then I left it for a long time, which is a pretty typical thing for women. And then I came back to it in my 30s, and I took additional lessons and training from a wonderful teacher by the name of Mary Hamilton, who's a retired, now retired officer with the Parks District, and she rode mounted patrol and such and taught. And so I kind of got my seat back and then rode, and then I rode extensively in Colorado, and I really, really enjoy it. I just haven't, with this transition into a new career, which I am making, I'm becoming, I am a fiduciary, and I can talk about that in a minute, but I rode horses a lot, and now I ride horses not at all, which has been difficult, but I'm adjusting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm jumping in.
Did you, just one question, Marnie?
Yeah.
Did you grow up, did you own horses growing up? Did your family have horses when you lived in?
Nope.
Okay, so you took lessons and stuff. Was that something that your family did, or did you decide, like, I'm interested in horses and I'm doing this on my own?
Yeah, the latter. I was interested in horses. My mom had ridden when she was younger, but she didn't have a horse and didn't take lessons with me or any of that stuff. So it was my own deal.
Cool. Okay, sorry, Mark.
No, sorry. Well, we have many people, Jason and Suzanne,
I know.
having more questions for you.
Okay.
So Kristen Freeman Fitzpatrick, by the way, says, hi, Suze. We need to get together soon.
Yeah.
But we have John Babcock and Julie Steelman have the same question.
Okay.
Are you still flying?
Well, thanks for the question, you two. That's really nice of you to ask. I am not currently flying. When I was in high school, I was telling Marty and Jason, I got my private pilot license, and later I became I kept studying while I was going to college. I lived at home to economize, and my deal with my parents was that they graciously paid my tuition at the University of Minnesota, but I had to be responsible for my flight training, which was quite a bit more expensive than the tuition at the U. And so that was our deal. And I went on and got an instrument rating and a commercial pilot's license and a flight instructor certificate. And for most people on that track, what you go ahead and do is you build time giving lessons and being a flight instructor. And that's what I was on the path to do. But I had an idiopathic grand mal seizure when I was 24. So I just had one. And it was in the shower, and we now pretty much know I simply passed out and hit my head and had a seizure. But at the time, the FAA didn't know, well, was this, did you have a seizure and then you fell down and hit your head, or did you pass out, hit your head and have a seizure? And they were very, and rightly so, they were very concerned about extending my medical and so I switched gears, and actually was in my first year of law school when it happened. And I had really no intentions of practicing law right away out of law school. I thought I would fly, and then maybe I would transition later to a position in management at the airline, after some time in the cockpit. And but that's not how it worked. I had to switch gears pretty quickly and really focus on my law school education. I was very grateful to be in law school because it was quite a destabilizing time. With the head trauma, they didn't know whether I had a brain tumor or whether this was the onset of epilepsy or something like that. So I was really grateful for the structure to have something else to do, focus on, transition to. And so, no, I don't fly anymore, although I think I could get a medical now, but that there's an arc in life to certain things, like maybe raising a family, right? Or, in a certain job, you may reach the arc of whatever that work to where that takes you. And that arc of flying and whatever has passed for me, where I really don't even have a huge interest in doing it as an avocation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you ever own a plane?
No, they're a worse money pit than horses.
Yeah.
It's for real. It's all of a sudden
Yeah.
like, oh, you need an engine rebuild, and do you have $12,000 or $15,000 extra dollars? No.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and then you got to put it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Find a place.
Yeah. It's like a boat.
So, what has anything, since you've moved to California and you're not riding horses and you're not flying planes,
Yeah.
has anything, have you begun the arc of a new hobby
Yeah.
or avocation?
Well, yeah, I've always been a big hiker. I did that a lot in Colorado, and I hike every day with my dog, and I'm really grateful to live close to what's called the Miller Knox Regional Park. And so it's right on the water, but it incorporates a series of trails and really nice hiking trails that are relatively near to the house. So I take the dog every day and hike, and it really grounds me. The transition to being a fiduciary, and a fiduciary is basically someone who quarterbacks the lives of people who either don't want to do a lot of the management of their own lives or can't. So the work includes work like as a trustee or a guardian or a conservator. And I'm actually a national certified guardian and also a California licensed professional fiduciary, but it's it's really like managing somebody else's life and making sure that the investment advisors and the and everybody is kind of that they're all playing according to Hoyle, and that they have, you know, just to kind of be an overseer. And as a part of that, I told Marnie this in a text on Messenger, that I'm going to get trained as a death doula this fall. And because what I foresee will occur is that a lot of the people that I will work for will be older, especially with the baby boomers aging off, and will that will be part of the transition. I've seen that with the mentoring that I've had here already in California. So my mentor has lost 4 clients in the last 6 months, and as a part of that, she had to do a lot of not only you know, work as far as preparation and financial planning, but just also the whole emotional aspect to getting ready to die. And you know, it was really profound, and it impacted me in a way that I thought that would be a good way to be of service.
Yeah, that's an interesting, you know, the boomers changed everything, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, in many ways, some good, some bad, but in many ways they've said like, well, we want to do it differently. Why does it have to be status quo? And now, yeah, I would imagine that transition to being very old and, dementia or whatever, that transition then even into death, they're like, we want to do it different. We want to take more control, or at least have more of a say so, right?
Well, they're living longer. Yeah. Go ahead, Marty.
So how do you learn how to be a death doula?
Well, I'm about to find out. I have a training right here that I need to put on my calendar.
Oh.
And so it's several online trainings, several readings and whatever. And there's a bunch of pre-work that needs to be done, but it's both, it's certainly instructional, but then it sounds like if I want to become certified, so this is a training, but if I want to become certified, then I actually have to do work in like a clinical setting, which would make sense. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'll tell you as I go through it. I think it's going to be, you know, I've taken a brief look at the syllabus. It looks very interesting. Requires a lot of introspection as well. And then when I get done with it, I'm probably inclined to figure out how I continue in a clinical session or in a clinical environment as well to complete the training, because I think that would be good.
Yeah. So you clearly have been a lifelong learner. Can we ask people about, you know, whether there was a particular teacher that they had growing up who inspired that? Was there someone who inspired that in you, and maybe in the profession that you chose?
Yeah, well, thanks. First of all, I had only the best experiences in the Hopkins School District. I'm a Gatewood kid, West Junior High, and then Hopkins High School, of course. And in high school, Dorothy Welch, who was the director of independent studies, as I recall, really worked with me a lot. And I did an independent study in Spanish, which was actually my minor in college. And I worked with Sue Chapman, if you remember who she is, and she was wonderful. And I kind of zoomed through a lot of material such that when I got to college, this is just such a hard thing for me. I got into college and continued on the path of learning Spanish and having it be my minor, as I mentioned. And when I was meeting with my advisor in I guess it would have been my senior year or whatever, he's like, "Oh, I see you took Spanish in high school." And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, how many sessions did you make it through?" And so I explained the curriculum and how it was somewhat independent study and whatever. And he's like, "Well, I'll tell you what, you qualify for like another 18 credits of college credit at the University of Minnesota, such that I did not have to take the first semester of a 5th year of college." And I was just like overcome. I graduated with 181 credits and needed 180 to graduate with a BA. And I was so grateful to Sue and also to Dorothy Welch for creating that independent study for me. And then beyond high school, I had a wonderful mentor in the practice of law by the name of Ann Schultz, who was a family law attorney, who was introduced to me by my parents' neighbor, who was a widower and who was dating her. And and he wanted her to be freed up to travel because he had sold his business and he had some resources and he wanted to have a partner in life and in travel. And so he's like, hey, this kid just graduated from law school, maybe you should talk to her. And it was a huge blessing. I got mentored in the practice of family law, and then I took her practice over, and she was released to go ahead and travel with him and live this kind of, their email address was vagabond something or another at whatever gmail.com, and they really traveled all over the United States. And I, in exchange, I had the opportunity to continue her practice and was mentored by her. So I feel very lucky and blessed to have had those experiences.
That's so cool. And did you have a job in high school?
No, my job, well, that's not true. I, in order to earn the money for flying, I worked on a Christmas tree lot called the Rangers, and where I sold Christmas trees and would do that kind of stuff and help them get their lot set up and sell Christmas trees. And it was actually pretty lucrative at the time. I think it was $9 an hour. It was like manna from heaven over, the winter season. And I actually worked in that organization with David Yu, who also went to high school with us, and who also, I believe, is an airline pilot now. We both had an interest in flying. Yeah. Or he's but I think he's an airline pilot for United. Anyway, so I did that. And in the summers, what did I do? Heck, I'm trying to think. I am sure I did. I just don't, it doesn't bubble up right now. I had a bunch of jobs in college.
Did you, when you went to the U, did you commute to campus, or did you live down
Yeah, I commuted, and that was kind of the deal with my parents. Like, they would pay for my tuition, but I had to kind of cover everything else. And so I really wanted to economize, and so I could throw all of my extra money toward flying and flight lessons. And so I lived at home, and that worked out well for me at the time, so I could really get the flight training that I wanted. Although I think in other ways it wasn't good, because I think in, going to college and getting away from home and individuating and becoming your own person and whatever is, that's an important stage in life. And I kind of deferred that a little bit, but it turned out okay.
Yeah. I know that's a thing at Minnesota. It's a big commuter school, and we've had people who did different things that we've talked to. So I didn't know that about you, that you lived at home. Did you live at home then all the way through graduation?
I did.
Yeah, that's rough, huh?
Yeah,
maybe you had a good relationship with your parents. I don't think I would have.
Relatively, right? I mean, I was like any other 21-year-old kid, when there were, conversations about, what time I was coming home and all this other stuff. And, I had all the same developmental stuff going on and individuating, but in this more constricted environment, and so it was what it was. I'm happy that I guess I did it the way I did, but I'm very cognizant that, my personal life was kind of crimped during that time, but it was all okay because I was really funding all of, the flight training got a lot of my energy and time as opposed to a significant other.
Yeah. Right.
Interesting. And so during the pandemic, Suzanne, what have you been doing differently?
Well, I moved to California in the midst of the pandemic, which everybody thought, I had 3 holes in my head or whatever. And, I kind of considered it myself, but it's when the opportunity came up. And I met my mentor on a trip to Egypt in February of 2020, just shortly before lockdown. And she was an attorney and a fiduciary in the East Bay. And so we got to talking because we were paired up, because I was a single person on the tour and so was she. And and so I just thought it was interesting work and chatted with her at length. And she's 20 years my senior, so she's like, I'm interested in retiring, and if you or your law partner has any interest in this work, let me know. And so in October of 2020, my law partner Rebecca Guyette and I made our way down to the East Bay and vetted the opportunity with masks and face shields and whatever else. And we decided it was a good opportunity. And we both have practiced family law a long time, and it has it's been really a good practice, but also it's a stressful practice, just because of the nature of the work and the hours and just the it's hard. It's hard to deconstruct families and marriages. So so then we decided to move down to work remotely, which we were both doing anyway, and to secure housing down here and to assimilate this woman's practice. So that's what we're doing.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, well, I have to ask one more question before we start wrapping things up. You mentioned in our pre-show conversation that you're also a tarot card reader.
I am, and I don't read it for lottery numbers or to see whether you're gonna do well in the races you're betting on in the future. But I do use it, and sometimes I'll use it with clients who are open to it. Really, the tarot is a tool of introspection, and it's comprised of 78 cards, 56 of which kind of parallel the typical playing deck, and then you have another 22 cards on top of that. And what they are 78 archetypes of different things that occur in life. And what they can help really get at is what's going on in the subconscious, and it can help people to talk about things that maybe aren't part of their conscious awareness, but come up when they draw a card. So if they have grief that they're not expressing, or they have some feeling about what's going on, what they end up doing is projecting their feelings onto the cards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's really designed to do, and is to really be a tool for introspection and development. And I love it. Yeah.
When you bring this up with some of your clients,
yeah.
So you say some are receptive. How do those conversations go?
Yeah, I don't bring it up as a matter of course ever.
Okay.
But sometimes I'm referred people who are very open-minded and who utilize this and will tell me that. And when we go through the process, I'll say, are you interested, or this in this situation seems to me like this card. Have you thought about how that might be, influencing the situation here? And the tarot deck is uncanny in its ability, for whatever reason, to be a tool for the people who vibe with it or who resonate with it. It's uncanny in its ability to bring up what's going on underneath the surface for them, whether it's grief or loss or anger or whatever. And sometimes it's revelatory. I've had more than a few people who are like, they might get a card that comes up like the moon, which often means that there's something going on underneath the surface, or that there's, something hidden or whatever. And sure enough, what's really going on is they're having a relationship with someone else. So you might get the moon, and then you might get the King of Wands. And I'm like, is there someone else in your life, or there's someone new in your life? And they're like, well, maybe. Is that going to be a problem? And I'm like, no, it's not. Minnesota's a no-fault state. No one cares about, what you're doing relationally, as long as it doesn't negatively impact your children. So, yeah, it's interesting that way.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Jason, have you ever had your tarot cards read?
I never have.
There's a first time for everything.
There is, and I don't even want to say that I'm like, I am not someone who's drawn to that, but I don't discount it either. And and what you just said is really interesting. That introspective aspect of the having your tarot card, tea leaves or palm or whatever. Yeah. What do you think it means? I think that's a good question to ask a lot of people. you know.
I think so too. And it could be any modality. You know, it's not just the cards. It could even be a deep conversation, you know, with a trusted friend. It's just that the cards have this ability to kind of stimulate the discussion. And for people who are creative or are drawn to, you know, images or whatever, sometimes in images, people pick out things from the images that they don't even know are going on consciously.
Yeah.
You know, this reminds me of a time when, you know, it's like, oh, say more. So my role as an attorney is not just pushing paperwork and negotiating deals. It's really as a counselor of law too. And in that, you know, in that role. And I'm not saying I'm engaging in the unauthorized practice of psychology. I'm not at all. It's just a tool that I use to help them get their feelings out or get, you know, just because often they feel, you know, they're okay, so the legal portion of the whole transition of the divorce is very small. It's a business transaction regarding, you know, the kids and the stuff and the income and how we're going to live life in two homes after the fact. The biggest piece of the pie is how to get through the emotional pain of the divorce. And so any tool that can help do that, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, interesting. I was just going to ask, you brought up how you played soccer a little bit in high school, and I'm always just you know, I'm interested in women our age who played sports growing up and their experiences and whether you still follow soccer and if you're a fan and if you recall your high school years.
Yeah, I played a lot of softball from the time I was probably 5 to the time I was 15. And then I played soccer as well. And I was a terrible soccer player. I will apologize to Patty, Heather Thorson, whoever else was on the team. You know, I was a warm body, but I can kind of figure out as a defense person kind of how to push people out of bounds and to try to keep them, you know, from, you know, scoring a goal. So that was my claim to fame playing soccer. I showed up, I was sort of kind of a warm body, and I had minimal skill. And as playing softball, I enjoyed that a lot. I really didn't continue into high school only because by the time I got into high school, I had the interest in aviation. So I was already kind of doing a ground school or whatever, and I just didn't have, you know, limitless resources in either money or time to be able to, you know, fund all those different things. So I had to choose, and I chose aviation. But my experiences generally with sports were wonderful, and that they, you know, not only did I benefit from being a part of a team and learned great skills doing that, but also I really, athleticism and exercise have stayed with me. It's been a lifelong thing. I played some rec soccer in an intramural league in my 30s, and I enjoyed that. And that's something I would consider doing out here. But here again, my skill set is not great. So I would have to be part of the, you know, whatever the league is for the people who, you know, are not competitive and, you know, who just want to run around and, you know, pass the ball.
There's a league.
Go ahead.
There's a league for everything in the Bay Area, Suzanne. You'll find a spot.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, and the benefit of being over 50 and playing sports, I've found, is that not a lot is expected of you. So you you can be like a total beginner, and people are like, "Whoa, look at you taking up something new after 50. Good for you."
Right. Exactly.
Funny.
Hey, our pal from Gatewood, Tia Martinson Finkenauer, is on here, and she says that she just tuned in. But one of her fondest memories of elementary school is walking to your house for a field trip to hear your dad play.
Yeah.
What did he play? What was that all about?
Yeah, my dad was the organist at Cicero's Pizzeria in Edina.
That's right.
And it was during a time when, you know, it was entertainment, and it was a Wurlitzer Theater pipe organ, and it was a Barton pipe organ at Cicero's. And he put on a bunch of different costumes, and he was a wonderful keyboardist. And then around that same time in the mid-70s, he actually had a 3-manual 10-rank Wurlitzer Theater pipe organ installed in our home, and built another room for it, and gave lessons, and then played himself, and he played the organ himself, the Wurlitzer himself, and entertained the children from around the neighborhood and his family. and I think it was my kindergarten or first grade or whatever it was class. And so one day we all came over and had milk and cookies at my parents' house. And I want to say it was around the holidays, but I don't remember, although I have photos of it. And
Nice.
the kids came over and we sang songs and played, and he was goofy and fun and whimsical. And that's who he was. He's now deceased, but that's what Tia's talking about. And what I remember about Tia is that she used to play the harp. So her dad, whose name was Art, as I recall, he used to haul this harp around. It was like bigger than her, like by 10 times. And then she would sit there and play the harp. That's really, which was a great memory.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks for that, Tia. Yeah, I remember. I want to say your dad came to school too and talked about the organ, even if he wasn't.
He may have.
playing for-
Yeah,
Um,
he may have. Yeah.
yeah.
He was a fun guy. He was a businessman by day and eventually retired as the senior vice president in charge of marketing for Digital River. But his love and his passion was music, and he was a Hammond B3 artist, like world-class jazz organ artist, and also just a wonderful pianist, a jazz pianist. And so, and he played a lot in trios and had his own trio and whatever. And I missed his music a lot, I'll say.
Stacy Semler notes that he scared children by playing the Phantom of the Opera theme.
Yes.
But she says she loved going to Cicero's because of him.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
That's cool.
Yes.
What a neat memory. Thank you for sharing that.
It is very cool. Cicero's. I remember. I have vague memories of Cicero's. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover today, or any questions?
I think so. I just, thanks for having me on. You know, I've had an unusual life. I mean, a lot of people, I think, got married and had kids and you know, lived what I would call a more traditional life, a wonderful life. You know, I certainly have missed that, seeing, you know, my friends' children grow up and move off into their own lives. Like, you know, Kristen Freeman Fitzpatrick, all of her children are now grown and out of the house.
Yeah.
And doing well in their lives. And Carrie Vile Salmon, who's another good friend of mine from high school, also her girls are grown up and doing well. They live in Arizona, and it's amazing. It's like it goes by in the blink of an eye. And so I've certainly missed out on that. And I, you know, there has been I've had to do some grieving about that, but I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that I've been given. And because I haven't had those responsibilities, I've had the opportunity to really to walk down a few different roads, and it's been a real blessing and a joy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of looking at it. Marnie,
Jason,
who's coming up on the show?
well, get ready, people. Next week is episode 66, Phil Bremer.
Oh, great, Phil.
September 21st, Ton Nguyen, live from Minnesota. I'm excited about that. September 28th, Kathleen Russett Stacey. October 5th, the one and only John Dale. October 12th, Michael Ilhe. Help me out.
Eiley.
Michael Eiley. October 26th, Wendy White McDougal.
Oh, great.
November 9th, the baseball team show. Eric Haugen's coming back. December 7th, the band show. We got a lot going on, Jason. And in the calendar, everyone, I also wrote down episode 93. February 1st is Jason Joyce's birthday party show. He declined last year, but we're gonna celebrate Jason on episode 93.
I don't think I had a choice in this. This is
No
all
choice.
news to me. News to me.
Surprise.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a vacation that week and I won't be able to make it.
Oh,
We'll combine.
You're gonna have to have a real special guest for KHOP, the 88th episode, right? That symbolizes our graduation year.
That is true. That's
Oh,
a
right,
good-
I misnumbered it. Okay, well, we'll talk about that later.
Good call. Good call. Suzanne, it was great catching up with you.
Hey, thanks. It's been fun to chat with you both. Thanks for having me on the show.
And Marnie, thank you for the exceptional booking. And,
Oh, you are welcome.
I already forgot who you said was on next week.
Next week, Phil Bremer.
Phil Bremer, one of the distance running and skiing kings of Hopkins High School. So looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
now a very, very successful realtor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure
Fantastic.
he'll tell you all about it.
I can't wait. We've got a number of successful realtors in our class,
That's
including
true.
Tim Saprell. All right, everybody. Marnie, Suzanne, take care.
Be
Nice to see you.
safe.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching too.
Yeah, stay safe.
Adios.